Hi guys, Trevor Swenson with Through the Darkness, my journey with PTSD, trauma and stressor related disorder, and a discussion of unresolved trauma. Today I wanted to talk to you about being vulnerability. I think that it is a very important aspect of the healing process. At least for me it was very, very important, but there were also some lessons that I learned in being vulnerable, life lessons, not just lessons with dealing with trauma and PTSD and trauma and stress related disorder, but actual lessons in life itself. I have a very simple diagram that I want to base our entire discussion on. Vulnerability, you can see represented by this triangle. Most vulnerability, least amount of vulnerability. The most amount of people in your life, the least amount of people in your life. And I want you to see that the more vulnerable you are, it should be with the fewer number of people. It's a good rule of thumb. It's a good diagram to remember as you walk through anything in life, whether it be PTSD or life scenarios. It's really worked out well for me. I think I'm going to title this video that I'm doing today, the leaky rowboat versus the ship. When you think about people, you can really categorize them in one of two categories when it comes to your ability to be vulnerable with them. Leaky rowboats or great big seaworthy ships. And what I want you to remember about when you think about your own vulnerability and opening up about whatever your trauma is that if you step into a leaky rowboat and it sinks to the bottom as you get a little ways from shore, you won't be surprised. The same goes with people that are not in your circle of trust, your inner circle. You get what you put into a relationship, and if you pour yourself into somebody as far as your vulnerability or your story goes, and they are in the leaky rowboat category, you need not be surprised what happens with that information or how they benefit or the lack of benefit that they have in your journey with PTSD. The big ships, on the other hand, if you think about it, those are the people with the deepest level of trust. Those are the people that as you get further away from shore, the more sure you become about their seaworthiness, if you will, as far as trustworthy, perseverance, hopeful, and protective. It's not surprising when a ship in your life is seaworthy and doesn't sink. There's also the flip side of that, which I've experienced in my life, and it's actually very hurtful when you put a lot of faith into a ship per se, and that ship goes down. And when that ship goes down, as I'm going to talk about in an episode on trust, your trust in any vessel is zero. The biggest, most seaworthy ships in your life sunk to the bottom when it came to opening up and being vulnerable with people, and it left a mark. Not only do you want nothing to do with the leaky rafts in your life, the leaky rowboats, but you no longer have a level of trust in being vulnerable with the ships in your life either. And that's a real tough thing to process. I needed to be very, very vulnerable. And the lesson that I learned in walking through PTSD, the lesson I learned in trauma and stressor related disorder, is that you need to pick your vessels well. You need to really choose carefully those people that you are going to be completely transparent and vulnerable with. And you also have to make sure that it's not a situation where the outward appearance is ship and it ends up being a leaky rowboat, if you will. I've experienced both, and I know that having walked through the trauma that I have walked through and being in the midst, if you will, of my recovery, that the leaky rowboat and the ship analogy and this diagram have really rung true for me. The greatest amount of vulnerability should come with the least amount of people. The least amount of vulnerability should come with the most people. If you get this diagram backwards, and if you'll give me a moment, I will write this up very quickly. If this is what it looks like, that you are completely vulnerable with everybody that you come into contact with, you know what this space, shaded space is in between here? It's called pain. It's called emotional pain. Because I have found personally that you can't be completely vulnerable and transparent with just anybody, because this forms when you get the diagram wrong. And there are a lot of people, as I noticed, that are willing to share their story to anybody and everybody and be completely transparent. And there are people that don't have very good intentions for you, or may not have your best interest in mind, or may not even serve a direct purpose in your healing and your recovery. And so don't waste that effort. Don't waste that effort, because it will show up in this scenario. In hurt and pain every single time. It's one of the reasons that as I do these videos, one of the things I haven't had a chance to talk about is the time before the video and the time after the video. And I really feel like God has led me to tell my story in the midst of my recovery for a very specific reason. Because as I talk about vulnerability, and as I talk about trust, and as I talk about flashbacks and hyper-vigilance and anxiety and major depressive disorder and chemical abuse and triggers, I hope there's a small part of you that can appreciate that it's a very hurtful process to go through to tell my story. And my purpose behind my story in doing this while I'm still hurting is because the loss of trust and the abuse of the vulnerability and the chemical abuse and the major depressive disorder and the anxiety, all of those things are and were very painful to me. And there would be nothing more satisfying to me, nothing more fulfilling, nothing more purpose-driven than knowing that in listening to this story of mine, that there might be one person that catches something that shortens their amount of time of suffering and quickens their steps into recovery. That is my purpose through this. And I will tell you that it is very, very difficult to talk about these things. In fact, not only my family, my immediate family and my friends, but also the doctors and the providers that are involved in my care completely see a difference in me as I work through the emotions of talking about having trust broken and having to battle a chemical that owned me, and all of the dumb things that I did that hurt people as I was struggling with anxiety and depression and chemical abuse It's reliving it all again, and I'm not out of the woods yet, but there's no time to waste in helping people. And so I just ask you to be vulnerable. It's necessary to be completely transparent and vulnerable because I was not at the beginning of my journey. 2, pick those people very, very carefully, and they will be small in number, or something is wrong with your vetting system. And number 3, have the radar up and learn about people, because it will help you in your life journey as well as you discover the gems in your life that turn out to be, again, your incredible pride of lions that are protective, that persevere, that are hopeful, and that are compassionate, and that are going to be there in the beginning, the ugly middle, and in the end, to where you are recovering and healing, becoming the person that you were meant to be, with the purpose that you were supposed to walk out, with the God-breathed talents that you have had all along in the journey of unresolved trauma, PTSD, and trauma and stressor-related disorder. I ask you to subscribe. It would be great. I ask you to click the notification bell. Please forward this to somebody that might need a little bit of advice coming from somebody speaking about my experience in PTSD, with PTSD, on vulnerability and trust, and knowing how to navigate talking about trauma and opening up completely. You opening up, you turning yourself inside out has to happen to start healing. And I want to be sure that it is with somebody professional, somebody safe, somebody who loves you, somebody who has your best interest in mind. Be well, take care, and I can't wait to spend time with you again. Again, this is Trevor Swenson. We are punching through the darkness. We are not standing in the darkness. See you next time.